Thank you for the recognition. I rise today to speak in support of Martha Williams to be the Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I represent a state that goes by many names. Most of you know it as Montana, but it's often called Big Sky Country, the last best place, and even the Treasure State. Montana has earned these names through an abundance of beauty and natural resources, and as a result, we've fostered a robust outdoor economy that relies on responsible forest management. Folks come to Montana from all over the world to enjoy all that our state has to offer, and thousands of folks make their living by working the land and showing folks the best way to enjoy it. But the key to preserving our multi-billion-dollar outdoor economy is proper stewardship and oversight of our natural resources. That means talking with folks on the ground. It means bringing competing interests to the table to find the most sustainable ways to manage our public lands. Not only do our forests and rivers create thousands of good-paying jobs, but they also create countless memories for families in our country. So it's critically important that we have balanced oversight in place to guarantee that Montana's outdoor economy remains vibrant for generations to come. The Director of Fish and Wildlife Service plays a central role in this oversight, and it's why I'm proud to support Martha Williams' nomination today. As Director, she will be tasked with the management and recovery of our nation's fish and wildlife and overseeing a large chunk of our public lands, 89 million acres to be exact, from Montana's own Red Rock Lakes National Wildlife Refuge all the way to the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. As a Montanan and a former director of the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Ms. Williams has demonstrated time and time again her ability to bring folks together, to find lasting solutions, to collaborate, to find common ground. She always leads with science and has developed state management plans for issues ranging from grizzly bears to aquatic invasive mussels. And she's done it with input from all the relevant stakeholders. She also has a profound respect and understanding of the bedrock laws and guide land and wildlife management. She'll be bringing with her over a decade of legal experience at the Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, as well as a well-regarded legal scholar at the University of Montana. She has spent her entire career standing up for our public lands and proven herself to be a thoughtful, nonpartisan steward who works collaboratively with folks on the ground to make positive change. Her top-notch ability to find common ground between sportsmen and conservationists alike, and her skills as an exceptional problem solver will make her an outstanding director at the Fish and Wildlife Service. She has strong support from sportsmen and women and biologists and academics alike, and has already received strong bipartisan support from the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee. She was passed out of committee on a 16-4 vote. Now, make no mistake about it, we will miss her leadership in the Treasure State, but I am looking forward to see her effective management skills at the federal level. This position is very important for the stewardship of our land and our waters, and I would urge my colleagues to support her confirmation today, and in that vein, I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate consider the following nomination. Calendar number 650, Martha Williams of Montana to be Director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. That nomination be confirmed through the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no, that's it. That's it.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
Senator from Alaska.
Madam President, reserving the right to object, I'd like to talk a little bit about not just Ms. Williams, who, as my friend from Montana has mentioned, I actually think she's qualified, but the issues that are in front of the Fish and Wildlife Service as we speak that relate to my state, the great state of Alaska. And unfortunately, Madam President, it has been one executive order, executive action, delay, targeting Alaska, some from the Fish and Wildlife Service, that has had an enormously negative impact on my state. So I agree with the senator from Montana. Fish and Wildlife Service is important. He mentioned that it manages 89 million acres nationwide. 77 million acres of that 89 are in Alaska. 85% of Fish and Wildlife Service land that is managed is in one state, the great state of Alaska, a size bigger than the state of New Mexico, just the Fish and Wildlife Service land control. So this agency, this nominee, will have an enormous impact on my constituents, and indeed right now is having an enormous impact on my constituents, and I can't get them to do anything constructive for the people I represent. So let me give you two, Madam President, and perhaps my colleague from Montana can help me out with this. These are two directly in the jurisdiction of the Fish and Wildlife Service that we've been asking for support on and haven't gotten it. One is the Russian River Land Exchange. This is a vital exchange that needs to happen for a highway project on Alaska's Kenai Peninsula. Here's the thing about this land exchange, Madam President. It's been in the works since 1975. 44 years, to be exact. We believe it's the longest-running federally led environmental impact statement in the history of America, which is actually what happens a lot in the great state of Alaska. Groups come up, they don't want any resource development, they don't want any access to land, and they sue, and they stop, and they try to delay things. This one has been delayed in one form or another for 44 years. Now, the previous administration, to its credit, heard the voices of Alaska, responded to the input from different stakeholders, and actually put forward a reasonable land exchange that was approved by the federal government. The regional office of the Fish and Wildlife Service sent the approved package to headquarters, Washington, D.C. in November, where it sits. So, Madam President, one thing I'd like to do before this nominee moves forward is to get a commitment to approve that. It's very simple. 44 years, I don't think we're asking too much, but it's delayed. Let me give you another one, Madam President. Many of you have heard about the King Cove Road. Well, you're going to hear about it again because it's an issue that every Alaskan, even those who don't live out on the Aleutian Island chain, are passionate about. Only in Alaska could this happen. In an 11-mile single-lane gravel road that will save lives for people in the community of King Cove, primarily Alaska Native, and they need approval of that through another land exchange. We have been working on that for over 40 years. 40 years. People in my communities in that part of the state have died because there's no road to access an airport. A lot of storms in that part of the world, the Aleutian Islands. And when they need access to get out on a plane, they often don't have it because we can't build a single-lane, 11-mile gravel road. So we have a land exchange approved by the previous administration. This administration has said they're looking to approve it too. That's great news. But the Secretary of Interior has said she's not going to fully endorse it until she goes out to King Cove and sees it herself. Okay. We've been waiting for that visit for a year. So here's the theme here, Madam President. with the new administration, if there's something that has been helpful to my state, primarily by the previous administration, the Trump administration, on so many issues, bipartisan issues, for Alaska had helped us in historic ways. So on those helpful things, the new administration comes in and they say, we're going to delay it. We're going to delay it. We got to relook at it. We don't know. If the Trump administration did it for Alaska, it must have been bad. That's their view. But on things that harm my state, this administration, on day one, has expedited so many things. Day one, the president's in office for 1 hour and he issues an order dealing with ANWR, which this body approved in 2017. So, if it helps Alaska, they delay it. If it hurts Alaska, they're all over it. And so what we have, Madam President, in the first year of the Biden administration, first year, 21 executive orders and executive actions negatively impacting my state across the board on every topic you can imagine. Access to lands, tourism, fishing. 21 executive orders or actions. I gave a speech on this before the holidays. It was 20. Now it's 21. Solely focused on Alaska. There's no other state in the country that is getting this kind of attention from this administration. I'm sure the great state of Montana isn't. And, Madam President, it's not just about resource development. These actions are hurting the ability of my constituents to put food on their table, lights on in their homes, jobs, cultures. In one area that doesn't get nearly enough attention, these actions, so many of them are actually negatively impacting the Alaska Native community of the great state of Alaska. The Native people of my state, targeted. Let me give you one example. The previous administration, working with this body in a bipartisan way, finally passed a bill that provided justice to Alaska Native Vietnam veterans who served their country during Vietnam. The Alaska Native community is one of the most patriotic communities in the country. They serve at higher rates in the military than any other ethnic group in the country. And when many of them went to fight in Vietnam, they came home, and a law that had been on the books since 1906, the ability to get a Native allotment, had expired. And they came home and said, wait, I can't get my Native allotment? So we finally fixed that, almost a half a century later. Of course, a lot of radical enviros hated it because it was getting land in Alaska to people. The number one issue I raised with Secretary Holland during her confirmation process was to make sure the executive order to get these lands to Vietnam veterans, Alaska Native Vietnam veterans, stayed on track. The Trump administration did all they could to make it happen. All they had to do was hit send. She delayed it for 2 years. Delayed it for 2 years. Wasn't even going to tell the delegation. I guarantee you, Madam President, in the next 2 years, as this is being delayed, a lot of these Vietnam vets, Alaska Native Vietnam vets, will die before they even get their lands. So we're starting to hear it. And I want to make one final point because it's very important. This administration talks a lot about racial justice, environmental equity. They talk about it all the time. But it comes with a caveat. They say they want to help disadvantaged communities, minority communities. I think that's a good goal, but it comes with a caveat. Racial justice, environmental equity, unless and then they get targeted. And a lot of these executive orders are targeting them. I got a whole list where some of the most disadvantaged Americans in the country are being targeted, in my view, because of their race, by this administration. Madam President, I've submitted these before, but I'm going to submit them again for the record. Several letters from Alaska Native groups talking about this unwarranted lack of consultation and targeting of their interests in my state. I'd like to submit them for the record.
Without objection.
So here's one. The president of the Voice of the Arctic Inupiaq, John Hobson Jr., quote, "In terms of equity, racial equity, we understand the Biden administration has made promises domestically and internationally to curb this country's emissions. And we, as Inupiaq people, whose homelands are on the front lines of climate change, can understand the need to move in that direction when it comes to address government policies. What we cannot support, however, is that those efforts are often made on the backs of indigenous peoples in Alaska without even a conversation. That is not how more equity is achieved. The federal government must allow us time and resources for a thoughtful, deliberative, and sustainable transition of our economy, but instead, we have seen secretarial and executive actions from this administration that threaten our way of life and economic sustainability, and therefore our entire way of life in America's Arctic. Another group, apparently consultation with all indigenous groups in the country, except for those in Alaska, is this administration's policy. So bottom line, Madam President, I need commitments from the Fish and Wildlife Service on these issues, the Russian River Land Exchange, the King Cove Land Exchange, and more broadly, I need the administration to end its war on Alaska and our working families. Happy to discuss with the senator from Montana on these issues and maybe get his help. But for right now, I object.
Objection is heard.
Could I just get a minute? That's all. Unanimous consent.
Without objection.
Because I know there's a vote coming. I would just, first of all, I would ask my friend from Alaska, I appreciate the fact that you're standing up for your constituents to do what's right. I have no problem with that whatsoever. I have no problem with the concerns you brought up on the Russian River or the King Cove Road, although I don't know the issues nearly as well as you do. But my point is this: if you're able to put Ms. Williams in as director of Fish and Wildlife Service, she has a track record of listening to people, and you happen to have a U.S. Senator in front of your name, you will be at the top of the list. She's not somebody that shuts the door and says, just because you're a Republican, I don't want to listen to you. She's somebody that always brings in people, collaborates, and comes to a decision that will work. And I wouldn't be up here advocating for her if I didn't believe that.
Well, to my colleague, I look forward to working with you on that and those commitments, and look forward to moving her nomination forward in that light.
Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
International Department of State, Amy Gutmann of Pennsylvania to be Ambassador of the United States of America to the Federal Republic of Germany.